The vineyard was bathed in the kind of late afternoon sunlight that made everything look magical, golden, soft, almost unreal. Rows of vines stretched out behind the wooden banquet table, where glasses of rosé shimmered and sunflowers leaned out of mason jars like they were smiling. Michael adjusted one of the hand-lettered name cards, smoothing the edge as if it mattered. This was his gift to her, their 5-year anniversary. Every detail had been his idea, from the reclaimed wood table to the twinkling lights he'd hung from the trellis beams the night before. He'd even borrowed design ideas from the wedding venue they'd fallen in love with years ago. It wasn't just a party. It was a memory he was trying to rebuild, a message without words. I still choose you. She wore the silk sage green dress he'd picked out 3 months ago, said it made her feel like a goddess. And she looked like one, no doubt. But her laughter, the kind that turned heads, wasn't aimed at him. It was all for Connor. Tall, tanned, just slightly too familiar. The friend from yoga, she'd said. Michael had noticed it weeks ago, the way her eyes lit up when Connor's name came up in casual conversation. But he hadn't pressed. He trusted her. Or maybe, deep down, he didn't want to know the truth. Guests mingled, sipping wine, admiring the view, and asking about the decor. Michael smiled and thanked them. He poured champagne into flutes and made sure everyone had enough prosciutto-wrapped melon bites. He kept moving, kept hosting, kept hoping she'd glance at him with the look she used to give, the one that said, "You're my whole world." But it never came. Instead, when the sun dipped just low enough for the fairy lights to flicker on, she clinked her glass with a spoon and stood up. Michael assumed it was a toast. He even raised his own glass, ready to be embarrassed in that sweet coupley way. He waited for her to say his name. But she said, "To Connor." The crowd hushed for a moment, unsure if they misheard. She went on, her voice warm and clear. "For being the one who reminded me what it means to feel seen again." Michael's smile cracked. His fingers tightened around the stem of his glass. And in that split second, amid the applause, the confused murmurs, and the widening eyes, he realized he hadn't built a celebration. He'd built himself a stage to be humiliated on. And she wasn't done yet. Michael stood there, as if the earth had vanished beneath his feet. The toast still rang in his ears. "To Connor, for reminding me what true connection feels like." Her words were crisp, deliberate, and each syllable sliced into him like a scalpel. Around them, polite laughter rose like a slow tide, nervous and uncertain. No one knew whether to cheer or cringe. The guests shifted in their seats, raising glasses out of habit more than celebration. Michael, however, didn't move. The envelope felt heavier than paper should ever weigh. It was cream-colored, high-end stationery, with the words, "To my forever," written in her handwriting. A familiar curve that once signed birthday cards and love letters. He expected something sentimental inside, a photo, a letter, something salvageable. Instead, he found a neatly folded separation agreement. The kind of document that doesn't ask questions, just ends things. The edges of the paper cut into his fingers as he unfolded it. Standing beneath string lights he had spent hours hanging. Orchids from Ecuador swayed slightly in the breeze, mocking the stillness in his chest. The guests began murmuring again.
the moment already slipping into gossip. Was this part of the party? Was this a joke? He glanced up. Across the table, she was already back at her seat beside Connor, giggling at something he whispered in her ear. Her fingers brushed his arm casually, like they'd done it 100 times before. Michael sat down, slowly. If he didn't, he feared his legs might give out. His glass of champagne, untouched, glinted next to his untouched plate. He couldn't taste anything anyway. Everything was suddenly metallic, like blood and humiliation. The silence in his own head was deafening. He thought about the handwritten notes he'd packed for her, each folded square of paper carefully dated. Day 1. You are still the girl who makes my heart race. Day 2. I love how you still laugh at my terrible jokes. Day 3. I'd choose you all over again, every time. Had she even read them? Probably not. Not when she was too busy writing a speech for another man. Not when she was drafting legal papers behind his back. Michael looked across the table again. Connor was laughing, casually sipping wine, his arm resting on the back of her chair. She leaned into him like it was nothing, like it hadn't cost anyone anything. And for her, maybe it hadn't. But Michael had paid a price. Months of hope, countless apologies for fights he never started, endless nights wondering where her smile had gone. He'd tried so hard. That morning, he had brought her coffee in bed, just the way she liked it. Extra foam, a dash of cinnamon, and a heart drawn in chocolate syrup. She had smiled, taken the cup, and kissed his cheek. And now, here he was, holding a legal declaration that their marriage was over, served to him like a party favor. The worst part? No one said anything. None of the guests intervened. Not a friend, not a cousin, not even her sister, who had once cried at their wedding, saying, "You two are meant to be." Everyone just sat there, pretending this wasn't happening. Because what do you do when betrayal shows up with canapés and cocktails? Michael got up slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden deck with an awkward screech that turned more heads than her toast had. But he didn't storm out. He walked, calm, almost eerie in his stillness. The envelope, now folded and tucked inside his blazer, throbbed against his chest like a second heart. He passed the dessert table, the one with her 5-tiered cake, chocolate and vanilla swirled like their wedding vows. He passed the champagne tower he had practiced assembling the night before, watching YouTube tutorials until his fingers ached. All for her, all for nothing. As he reached the edge of the vineyard, the sun finally dipped behind the hills. Michael didn't scream. He didn't flip tables or cause a scene. That's not who he was. Instead, he stepped away from the soft jazz and clinking glasses, down the cobblestone path lined with lanterns toward the vineyard's edge. There, beneath rows of twisting grapevines, the air was cooler, almost still. It wrapped around him like silence in the middle of chaos. He stood for minutes, maybe more, hands deep in his pockets, shoulders drawn tight, his breath shallow but deliberate. The sun was dipping low now, painting the horizon with burnt oranges and pale pinks, colors she loved. He remembered how she used to take pictures of skies like this. Now, it felt like they were mocking him. Back at the party, laughter picked up again. Someone raised a toast. Music floated into the field like static from a radio that didn't know what station to commit to. And just like that, life moved on. For everyone else. For her. Michael turned and walked to the guest cottage where they had planned to stay that night. Every detail of that plan was now offensive to him. The rose petals scattered on the bed, the champagne chilling beside the window, the framed photo of them that she had once lovingly ordered as a surprise. He didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed until midnight. Then he opened the closet, took down her suitcase, and began to pack. He wasn't angry in the way people imagine. No broken glasses, no screaming, just methodical, like a man who'd been trained to disassemble a bomb. Dress after dress, each item folded neatly, her favorite lotion placed gently in the side pouch. The diamond necklace he'd gifted her last anniversary, he left it on top. No note, no goodbye. By 2 a.m., the suitcase was zipped and waiting beside her car in the parking lot. By 2:30, Michael was on the highway, driving away from the only life he'd ever built with her. He blocked her number. He turned off all notifications. He needed silence, not just from her, but from the echo of himself, the version that bent over backward trying to keep her happy. For a week, she tried to reach out. First, a few calls. Then, a string of texts. "Can we talk? You're being dramatic. I didn't mean to hurt you." But Michael had muted her presence from his life. The buzz of her name on his screen was replaced with the satisfying quiet of nothing. Then came the social media posts. It started innocently enough. A photo of a beach in Sedona, captioned, "Finding my peace." He would have scrolled past it, if not for the hand visible at the edge of the photo, holding hers. A man's hand. Michael knew it instantly. Connor. He recognized the gold bracelet, the veined wrist. He remembered that hand from the party, casually curled behind her chair, like she was already his. 2 days later, they were in Bali, matching yoga poses, smiling in soft light, captions full of healing and letting go. Michael sat in his apartment scrolling through the images, each swipe like another dagger in his ribs. Healing? What exactly was she healing from? Being adored? Being prioritized? Being married to a man who made her the center of his world? She posted a reel next, laughing on a boat, wind in her hair, Connor pouring champagne beside her. The caption read, "Sometimes letting go is the bravest thing you can do." Letting go? He nearly laughed. She hadn't let go. She'd traded up, or at least that's what she thought. Traded a husband for a fantasy, a foundation for a fling. Michael shut off his phone, slammed it face down on the table, and stood in his kitchen like a statue. The silence was loud now, aching and alive. He walked to the bathroom mirror and stared at himself. Same man, same tired eyes. But something was shifting. He pulled open the drawer beside the sink and found her toothbrush still there. Without a second thought, he snapped it in half and tossed it in the trash. Next came the robe she'd left hanging behind the door, the mug that said his and hers, the framed beach photo from their anniversary trip. Gone. All of it. The next day, he canceled the anniversary dinner reservation, still on the books, 1 month away. He called the florist and ended the monthly orchid delivery. He blocked her on Instagram, Facebook, even Spotify. Their shared playlist was the last straw. Michael wasn't just angry. He was activated. He returned to work with a sigh.
In the quiet solitude of his apartment, Michael found himself standing in front of a pile of unused lumber he had ordered months ago with the intention of building a bookshelf for their shared living room, a plan that died the night she handed him that t-shirt. Now, with no one to design for but himself, Michael finally picked up the tools he'd left untouched in the storage closet. It started small, a modest coffee table, a blocky, imperfect thing. The stain was uneven, the edges slightly crooked. But as he stood back and looked at it, hands dusty, shirt soaked through from sweat, it felt like the most honest thing he had built in years.
Not because it was beautiful, but because it was his entirely. He posted a picture of it on his TikTok, not for validation, but more like closure. The caption read, "First time finishing something for myself." A few likes, then a few more, then 1,000. People began commenting, some curious about the design, some just moved by the caption. One comment read, "This feels like healing in wood form." Another, "Please post a tutorial." So he did. Each day after work, Michael returned home to sand, stain, cut, and film. The coffee table turned into a bookshelf, then floating shelves, then a custom dog crate cabinet someone commissioned from a nearby town. He called the page Wood and Worth. It wasn't about furniture. It was about rebuilding worth, piece by piece. The name resonated. His follower count exploded. Brands started reaching out. A tool company offered to sponsor him if he wore their apron in videos. An influencer invited him to co-host a workshop on creative healing. He declined that one, still too raw to share it all live. But it made him pause. People weren't just watching, they were connecting. He set up a corner studio in his apartment, sawdust on one end, soft lights and a phone tripod on the other. In the mornings, he still ran. 6 miles, then 7. His lungs stronger, his stride steady. By 6:45 a.m., he was back, showered, and on his laptop with a mug of black coffee. The writing started again too, this time for others. Small blog posts tied to his TikTok builds. He didn't mention names, didn't rant. Instead, he framed each post as a quiet parable. How building this drawer reminded me I'm not defined by abandonment. Or, I used to make dinner for 2. Now I make shelves and soup for 1, and that's enough. They hit home. One article got picked up by a small men's wellness magazine, then another by a lifestyle blog for single fathers. He began hosting free community classes once a month. Just a folding table, some tools, and a sign that said, "Learn to build with what you've got." Mostly single dads showed up, a few divorced men, one teenager whose mother had recently passed. They didn't talk about pain much, not directly. But in the way they sanded in silence, handed each other clamps, and offered a nod when something came out crooked but sturdy, Michael felt something powerful, mutual recognition. One Friday night, after posting a video of a walnut nightstand, Michael got a message request. He usually didn't open DMs from strangers anymore, but this one caught his eye. "My daughter sent me your video. I'm 62. My wife of 40 years left me last year. I haven't touched my garage since. But today, I cleaned it out. Thank you." Michael stared at it for a long time. He responded, "Build something. Anything. Doesn't have to be pretty. Just has to be yours." That message turned into a chain reaction. Others followed. A man in London built a planter box for his balcony. A dad in Montana restored an old dresser. A teacher in Brazil shared photos of a chair she made after watching his video on joinery. Michael printed a photo of each project they sent and pinned them to his wall above the workbench. He called it the Wall of Worth. Hundreds of images, pinned in rows like a quilt of reclaimed lives. And still, he never talked about her. Not by name, not directly. His revenge wasn't rage anymore. It was thriving. At work, Gregory noticed. Michael was sharper, more present. He was now leading the 2 most difficult client projects and had even begun mentoring junior staff. "Whatever you're doing," Gregory said one morning, "don't stop. You've become the guy everyone wants to be around." But it wasn't about being envied. It was about becoming visible again.
A year to the day after he walked away from that rooftop humiliation, Michael stood under the warm lights of a packed auditorium in Austin, Texas. The event was the National Design and Resilience Conference, an annual gathering for makers, architects, and thinkers across disciplines. His keynote? Crafting through collapse. A phrase that once lived only in the margins of his notebook had now become a rallying cry for an entire community of quiet rebuilders. Slides flickered behind him. Photos of his early, imperfect coffee table. The wall of worth covered in strangers' projects. And a final image. His own face, tired but smiling, standing in front of a workshop he had built from the ashes of a life once centered around someone else's spotlight. The applause was thunderous. It didn't just wash over him, it grounded him. Every clap felt like a nail driven into the frame of a new identity. Not ex-husband, not broken man, but builder, mentor, creator. After stepping off stage, a volunteer handed him a cold bottle of water and directed him to the green room. The quiet of the backstage area was comforting after the rush of adrenaline. He sank into a worn leather armchair, the hum of the event buzzing behind the walls. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and then his phone buzzed. A single text lit up the screen. "I saw your talk. I miss you. I was wrong." No name, but none was needed. His finger hovered over the screen. He could already feel the pull, the temptation to say something, to offer closure, or maybe to finally hear her say it all out loud. But that text didn't come from love. It came from distance, from watching him shine on a stage she never believed he could stand on. He put the phone down. No reply, no explanation, no reliving. Because he had already answered. Once, a year ago, when he walked out with dignity instead of fury. Again, in his first woodworking video. Again, with every mile on his morning runs. Again, with every story he published on his blog, helping others reclaim their worth. And now, with the world watching, clapping, and recognizing the man he had become. Not because he needed to be seen, but because he finally saw himself. The next morning, he was back in his studio. The coffee brewed strong. His favorite mug, now engraved with the words, "Worth it," steamed gently beside a half-finished dresser. The tools were laid out in neat rows. The early sun cast golden lines through the blinds, and the wood grain seemed to shimmer with potential. This time, he wasn't building for distraction, or healing, or revenge. He was building because it was his. Because the scent of sawdust, the weight of the mallet, the grain beneath his fingertips, they were all reminders that his hands had the power to shape more than wood. They shaped a life, a legacy. Emails continued pouring in. One from a school in Michigan asking him to speak to students about creative resilience. Another from a women's center in Oregon requesting guidance on launching a woodworking workshop for survivors of emotional abuse. He said yes to both. Not for attention, but because the movement was no longer about him. 157 missed calls had become a language, one of rising, of reclaiming, of rebuilding. That week, Sasha and Omar's app hit 100,000 downloads. The small startup Michael helped shape with spreadsheets and heart had become a fixture for small business logistics across the Midwest. They held a small celebration at the same diner they'd always met at. Michael wore the rebuilt shirt Sasha had designed, and this time, when someone asked for a photo, he didn't shy away. "Do you ever miss her?" Theo asked later that night as they sat on his rooftop drinking beers under a canopy of stars. Michael didn't answer right away. He thought of the birthday party, the cake, the lights, the t-shirt. He thought of the letter tucked away in his drawer, the rain-soaked night she stood at his door, mascara streaked and soaked with apologies. He thought of the man he used to be, silent, patient, invisible. "No," he said finally. "I miss who I thought she was,
but I don't miss being that version of me." Theo raised his bottle in a quiet toast. "To the version you are now." They clinked bottles. Michael didn't need closure.
Michael stood on the rooftop once more. This time, not as the man who had been broken, but as the man who rebuilt. The skyline stretched before him, silent, vast, and full of promise. He thought back to the moment it all cracked: the rooftop birthday party, the divorced t-shirt, the frozen smiles, and the deafening silence of betrayal. That night, he lost something, but not himself. No, that night he rediscovered the truth he had buried under years of compromise, that self-worth is not something granted, it's claimed. From the heartbreak of humiliation to the silence of 157 missed calls, from rebuilding his apartment to launching a brand, from the letter tucked in a drawer to the sound of applause in Milan, each step was a choice to rise, to not remain a supporting actor in someone else's story, but to write his own, one page at a time. He had learned that healing isn't linear. It's built like furniture, piece by piece, with intention, with patience. And just like in woodworking, it's the knots and flaws in the grain that make the final piece beautiful. The bracelet he once left on the table became a symbol, not of love lost, but of value regained. The t-shirt, once a weapon, inspired a movement. And the man who once asked himself in the dark, "What now?" had become the answer for thousands of others. Michael's story was never about revenge. It was never about her. It was about reclaiming dignity, choosing purpose, and walking through the door of betrayal into a room full of potential. And perhaps that's the lesson. You don't get to choose how people hurt you, but you always get to choose what you build from the wreckage. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own journey, let's talk in the comments below. What have you rebuilt? What's the one thing you took back that made all the difference? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because more stories like this are coming, and you deserve to be part of this rising.